Welcome to the Improve and Have Fun podcast. My name is Paul V. Perez, and on this podcast, I work on improving myself while having fun along the way with the hopes of encouraging you to do the same. And I do so by documenting my life and interests. Jason G and I will be talking about the sensation taking over the nation, and that's the Tiger King documentary on Netflix, where I asked several times, this is crazy. Can this have really happened? And guess what? It's all true. Or according to what the documentary is telling us. Before we get into the podcast, definitely want to hear your feedback, your comments. You can do so on the blog at improveandhavefun.com or wherever you may be listening to or watching this video. If there's a place that you can leave comments, please do so. We definitely read those. Please support the podcast by doing any or all of your eBay or Amazon shopping provided in the description for this podcast, this video. There's other ways to support. You can donate. You can buy a t-shirt. This podcast isn't free to do, but I love to do it. So it's a joy, but any dollars of appreciation, any notes of appreciation are, guess what, appreciated. But let's go ahead and get into the episode. All right, so Jason G and I are here. We both call the Tiger King and its ridiculousness with Joe Exotic. And we're here to talk about it. So, Jason,
It's
how you?
the full title. How you doing? Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. And it's funny. It comes up here as Paul is recording this call. Paul is recording the call, so it even tells me that you're doing that. It's pretty
That's
cool. Anyway,
cool.
we are doing this quarantine edition, and the official title, including the subtitle of Tiger King, is Tiger King: Murder, Mayhem, and Madness, a limited series on Netflix with 8 episodes. No, 7. Sorry, 7 episodes. Lucky number 7, and let's do it.
The synopsis of Tiger King on Netflix, like the synopsis of like what the series is about, is meet Joe Exotic, a gun-toting operator of an Oklahoma big cat park. He's been accused of hiring someone to murder his chief rival, Carol Baskin, and it goes into his story. It goes into the story of these individuals who, like, they have their own zoos, they have their own animals. I don't even know if it's illegal, but I guess it is in some states to have these animals, and they collect tigers and lions and all kinds of animals and stuff like that. And this has been one of the most popular shows, popular documentaries on Netflix. And like I'm talking about, like, it's in the cultural zeitgeist. Like I'm talking about, like, I have my podcast that I like to listen to. There's a pro wrestling podcast, and they were going on and on about this thing, which is completely unrelated to pro wrestling, even though he had some pro wrestling ties. Like he actually announced he was like a commentator on an NWA show. But also this video game podcast that I listen to, one of my favorites called Gamer Tag Radio, and they were mentioning and talking about this thing. So, I mean, that just tells me, just from that small little thing, that I'm pretty sure this goes for you the same. Like, had we been at work now, like, people would have been talking about Joe Exotic and this Tiger King documentary.
Yes. And it actually is it says here on the screen, it's in the top 10, but it's not only the top 10, it's the number 1 streaming show on Netflix in the US today. And it's been there ever since I've been watching it at number 1 for the past week. I think, I think it would have done well, but now that the fact that everyone's in quarantine, it's probably done even better. Like this has probably been, I mean, it's like a culture, like you said, a cultural phenomenon. And it's quite a series. We talked about it last time we talked a week ago, and we agreed that I told you I was going to watch it for this coming week. I watched like 1 episode a day, and then I just finished the last episode today. And let me tell you, it is quite an interesting episode. Series. I am not usually a big fan of these kind of documentaries that kind of like exploit certain things. I mean, I guess this is not really exploitation, but sometimes it's it just, after watching them, it doesn't, like, it just, I have a dark feeling after watching some of these, and this one, I mean, even though it's definitely not all happiness in terms of what happens, but it's very well done, and I think because of that, I enjoyed watching it quite well. Yeah. Which
Yeah.
tells you something, because I don't usually I'm attracted to these kind of series, but this one was good. This was a good show.
Uh, like I mentioned this. Well, I was thinking this. I didn't mention this, but when I saw the Aaron Hernandez documentary a few months ago, I did a review for that, a written review on the blog, and I wasn't intending on watching the whole thing. Like, I just wanted to watch it for like the first 20 minutes, but then I was hooked. And in one evening, I saw the whole thing. And that's the same thing that happened with this. It didn't happen over one evening, it happened over a couple. But like I'm telling you, I even told myself, I'm just going to watch this for 20 minutes. And if it doesn't hook me, I'll just go to something else. And wow, it's just the main star of this thing being Joe Exotic, and some of the things that are talked about and some of the things that are mentioned. And of course, this is from the documentarian's uh, lens. This is not
Perspective,
like
right,
this
right.
is because there's been a lot of articles that have come out after this that there was things that were left out and things that were not mentioned, and some of the people weren't happy about how they were represented
Trade,
in the show. But like you just be like, this can't be real. This guy is like, uh, this guy is just outrageous. You know what I'm saying? Like the things that he
right.
does. He's a singer, but not really. Because I found out that after I started to do my research, a little bit of research after watching the whole thing, and he didn't even sing those songs. Like those are like those. That was another guy singing the songs, and he just like got the songs from him, and all that music that's from that supposedly he was singing, he wasn't. And the reason what made me
I
it's
didn't
true.
even know that.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. Like what made me question that was like when the songs would come on, I was like, wow, his voice does not sound like the way he talks. But then maybe it's one of those things like Adele, like she sounds one way when she talks, but then when she sings, it's amazing, you know. So it's like maybe it's kind of that thing. But then come to find out, yeah, none of those songs were his. You know what I mean? Like that was just another person singing. But Joe Exotic,
Interesting.
he was an internet star, and but I'll tell you, like, we're talking spoilers here, you know.
Of
The
course,
thing,
as we always do.
yeah, and the thing I think that really does him in is like he like says death threats towards this Carol Baskin woman, and on social media, on his internet show, and that's something you don't do. You just don't like throw death threats at people on social media, or like I said, on the internet, because that's just like if we're walking down the street and I shout death threats at you. You know what I'm saying? That's a no
Could
go.
be used against you anytime. Yeah, sure.
And
And
he
then
did
this
this.
got quite serious.
Yeah, he did this repeatedly, over and over again. Like like there's that one scene when he has like a mannequin of Carol Baskin and he shoots it with a gun.
With a
Like
real gun.
yeah, yeah. So I think that's ultimately what really did him in. Like it doesn't work in his favor. You know what I'm saying? But what I give the guy props for was like he was in living in this world, and there was a lot of abuse and exploitation of the animals and stuff like that. But he really believed, like, you know, like he wanted to be a star, and he was just gonna kind of do it whichever way that he can do it. He did it. You know, like he'll run for a public office. He doesn't even know what he's doing. He'll make
Right, right.
he'll have an internet show. You know what I'm saying? And other people like gravitated to him. Like other people were like, "Yeah, dude, you're the man, and yeah, you know, I'm with you. Whatever you want to do, kind of thing." You know what I'm saying? And
Yes, yes.
crazy. It's crazy. You know, it's just like I said. This is something where I say this all the time on this podcast. Real life is stranger than fiction. This is the biggest example of this. And I have some other bits of new news that I found out about this. Uh, I found out about this documentary, but I wanted to hear what if you have any more points, of course.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. I think that this documentary is showing. It's there's a lot of tragic things that happen in it,
Yes.
especially as as we get towards the end of it. But it shows the good side and bad side of a lot of people. And I kept thinking, like, how all these people who are like against each other and threatening each other could have all like been on the same team at one point, worked together, and like it would have been great. But there's a lot of things going on in terms of ego, in terms of, oh, I think what you're doing is wrong, or you can't tell me what to do. and then this and that, and there's no real good guys and bad guys in this whole thing. I mean, you could portray anyone as good and bad, I think. And then, of course, everyone will say they're all crazy. And in some ways, maybe they are. But you could definitely see how they'll care for their cats. I think when Joe was younger, he was very suicidal, and when he got, I think he was introduced to big cats, right, at one point, and then that helped him get out of that depression, and he was turned on to big cats, and then he eventually started, taking care of them and opening this park himself, and the same thing goes for that other lady, Carol Baskin. Like she at one point was on the street, and then getting into big cats, saved her. There's a question of whether she killed her husband or not, and took her money. Like, so that I was going to say that description you had, that's on Netflix that you read, talks about how, that kind of like sums up one part of the show where he's hiring someone to murder Carol, but there's a lot of aspects of the show in terms of like how I think there's three major parks that they talk about: Carol's Park, Joe's Park, and this guy Doc Antlers or something. And all three, all three of them have similar ways of bringing in people and taking advantage of them in some ways. Like, yes, the people do agree on staying there and getting paid for very little or even working for free. But they all have that aspect that is similar to all. So to talk about one episode, I think the second episode I see, it was talking about the cult of how this kind of working for these animal parks become. It's not like the Bronx Zoo or the San Diego Zoo or any public zoo. It is like these are private zoos, and you can see how they're run in this way.
That's a great point. That's a great point because, the other people that are covered. I mean, it's a series of people. It's Carol Baskin, who's like is like the nemesis of Exotic Joe or Joe Exotic, right? Then you have Bhagavan Ansel, who is a mentor of Joe's. You have another person that comes in later, Jeff Lowe, as well.
Yes.
And there's another gentleman with Jeff Lowe who helps him, like he's mentioned, and he helps him build like the zoo in the end, but then they go their separate ways in the end. Then there's another gentleman, I think he's down in Florida, who he was like arrested during the 80s, like for some drug thing, and then he has his own zoo. So like they're covering all these people that they are into like big cats, and supposedly these like a shared thing that the documentary presented. Like when you get around these cats, it's kind of something internal, this internal connection that one feels with owning these animals, but as a show presents, like these are not animals that you can, and it's crazy because you and I have both living in New York City for as long as we have living in the Northeast. Like we've heard of news stories where people in their apartments have a tiger or a lion. Like what? You know what I'm saying? And like like as we've seen, especially this movie presented, I mean, people always, like, the news always reports it, but this documentary actually shows it. Like, these animals, like, you can, like, manage them when they're small, but once they, like, grow up, they're not that manageable. You know what I'm saying? In the sense of, like,
absolutely,
we see, I mean, combining this with the whole cult aspect, like, we had the one woman that worked for Joe Exotic whose arm was mauled, and she chose to amputate the arm and come back to work, like, immediately. Like, why? You know what I'm saying? Like, why would you just come back to work there?
She was given a choice, right? She was given a choice of either we can, work with you, work with the arm, but it'll take a lot of time and probably money. If you wanted to go that route, we can do that, or we could just amputate it and you'll be done and good to go. And then she's like, yeah, I'll just amputate it and I'm going back to work like next week or whatever. It was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, well, why go back to work? Like, dude, just go find another job or something. You know what I'm saying? But then again, like he especially would hire like convicts, and I know personally from personal experience, like if you've gone to jail before, if you've been to prison, that it's very hard to find a job. Like even
Right.
though by law, you shouldn't be stereotyped or anything like that, but it is very tough to find work if you have like a criminal record. And he hired criminals like from jail. He would pay them pennies. He would feed them. He housed them in the same area as the zoo, and he would feed them this like leftover food. I mean, they chose to eat that food, but they would eat this leftover food that he would feed the animals from Walmart, like meat and things that are about to expire. Like I said, you're hearing all these things, and the documentary, like you said, which you said perfectly, it's very well put together because it is so enticing that if it grabs you, for me, if something grabs you like in the first 20 minutes, like it did me, I think that speaks to the quality of the documentary. But there's so much crazy shit that happens, and you're like, what? Like that
Right.
that
Right.
that expression just keeps coming back up, and I'm like, what? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I always say a good documentary or a good movie is one that makes you interested in watching it, even though you have no interest. Like, you know, so do you and me, I mean, do we have a big interest in finding out about big cat zoos and stuff like that?
Oh,
Probably
fuck
we're not
no.
gonna, always go and find these, online, and maybe one time, maybe once in a while when we were younger, Discovery Channel will watch like a show on these things sometimes, but National Geographic. But in terms of like, yeah, so what I'm saying is like a thing like this, we have really no interest in this kind of subject, but it's so well put together, and of course the characters are also very watchable. It makes you want to watch. Like I think one of the reporters that were being interviewed in there, I think she was an Oklahoma City reporter,
Yes.
and she was interviewed in the studio, her studio or something. And then she even says, like, this guy, whatever he does, even though he's kind of a shady guy, he's just so watchable and he's so easy to watch. Like you could, so and then one guy we didn't mention. There's so many people in this show, but one person we didn't mention also was this guy who was from. He was working in a lot of Hollywood productions, and he came to film his own reality show. Right, this guy with the hat.
Doc
And
Antle.
right, right. No, well, Doc Antle is the guy who had his own park, right? But there was one guy with a skinny guy
Oh,
with a hat.
yeah, he came to go ahead and film the reality. Like he came to film Joe Exotic as a because the thing is what you like now what you just said is making me think like the thing with the reporter, the thing with this other guy, the guy who came to help him produce a show. There's something about Joe Exotic, about Carol Baskin, like you said earlier, about Doc Antle, something that there's some energy that they have that attracts people to them. You know what I'm saying? That
Right,
makes
right.
people like brings people to them. Like their belief in themselves or their belief in like doing the thing that they want to do is so big that people will just be like, yes, like lead us, please. Like we're
Yeah.
so attracted to you. So that guy as well, he saw Joe Exotic. The guy, I know he's the guy you mentioned. I think it's something Kirkham. I forget his name, but he saw Exotic Joe and he was like, this guy is like crazier than cat shit. But like, there's something so appealing about him that like people would completely watch this guy. You know what I'm saying? So,
Sure, sure.
yeah. So, and he was blamed for like burning down a part of the zoo, and he said that he didn't do it, but there was something caught on video that could have been him. Like, it's so crazy. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's insane. Like if you were to describe this to someone, or like if you wrote a book and a novel, and you wrote it this way, it would be like, wow, this is crazy. It's unbelievable. It's something
Dude,
that outrageous. Like it's crazier than fiction. One thing I was going to say about um, the cult part side of it again is so you have this one lady, right? It was Carol. Like she's the one who kind of is like friendly with PETA, the organization that's against like animal cruelty. And then because she's kind of tied with them in some way, she gets a lot of people on her side for that part to go against what Joe and the others are doing. So she gets a lot of people that come to work for her, and then she even admits it. They show her side too, that like she's not all that nice and good, because even though she has millions and millions of dollars, she hires people and doesn't pay them. She's like, I don't pay them because they'll work for free. And it's like,
Crazy.
well,
It's crazy.
and
It's
then they have
volunteers.
this T-shirt color system where you start with one color and then you work your way up. And then, I mean, so then the other guy, the guy, Doc Antle, he's actually at one point was really legit. And like, I think some of the animals in Ace Ventura were some of his, and like, so he was getting Hollywood to call him and get him involved with their productions. And because of this, and what happened with all that went on with the antics with the Tiger King, Joe Exotic, and his park and his connections, and then I think because Joe was arrested, he was telling on everyone else. He's like, you know what? If I'm going down and all this stuff is happening, then I'm going to tell all the bad stuff about what the other guys are doing.
Yeah, and he's talking about like ratting out his mentors, like Doc Antle or like the guy in Florida,
Right,
like
right.
he don't give a shit at the end. You know what I'm saying?
And then he was saying maybe it is the best way. Maybe I think he had like an arc, because he was kind of saying that yeah, what everyone is doing is maybe not so good towards the animals. Like he kind of saw it. Like, yes, he for sure doesn't like Carol because she's kind of hypocritical in what she does, because she basically is doing the same thing that they're doing, right? She has a park with animals in cages, and she's just saying, oh no, but I'm different than them.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. Well, my bro, we're gonna be wrapping it up now. I do have
yes.
some other news bits that I wanted to tell you about, like
Okay.
100% that they are gonna make a movie of this gentleman. Joe Exotic, he's talked about that he wants Brad Pitt to play him. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, Hollywood, 100%, they're seeing how popular this is, and a movie will be made. That's no doubt. That's a no-brainer. And also, this news bit about the show came out within the last 48 hours. They are filming, according to Jeff Lowe. He actually publicly came out and said that they are filming another episode of the documentary, which is going to be premiering sometime this month, because this thing has become so popular that Jeff Lowe said that they did film some new footage and that they're going to release a new episode of this documentary, which it wasn't supposed to have a new episode. It was supposed to end in episode 7. But since, like I said, this is so popular.
Jeff Lowe is the guy that was like hanging out in Vegas, and then he came to help Joe and kind of like took over the park. Okay, I remember.
Yes. So I did want to give those two little tidbits of information, But if we're gonna grade this, Jason, like I said, any final thoughts? And let me get a grade from you on Tiger King: Murder, Madness, and Mayhem. Netflix documentary on Netflix.
Yeah, I would say it would be an 8.5. 8.5 would be my score.
Oh, that's pretty high, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty high. Yeah, I would say I wouldn't go higher just because of the dark subject matter. So maybe but that always affects it too. Like if one doesn't like romances, then they're not gonna rate a romance movie high, right? But for me, it's kind of like like I said before, I don't typically like to watch these. Now I do like true crime stuff, and this is kind of categorized as a true crime documentary, but it is exploitive in some ways too. We're kind of like, all of us, the public watching the series, are kind of like getting our thrill in quarantine from these people's bad luck and bad situations. Like we see the good part of these people. All of them, I think, have a good side to them. And I did appreciate them showing us that, but yeah, they really did some dark things, and it turned very dark. So anyway, 8.5 is my score.
That's really good. I gave this a 9 because this was fantastic. Like I said, for the way that it hooked me, it was really fantastic. The reason why I gave it a 9 and not like a perfect score is because I felt like with the Carol Baskin story, I got a little like bogged down there. Like it wasn't as exciting for me. Even though, like I said, you're right that these are crazy things that they're reporting, but in terms of an entertainment value, like for the Carol Baskin stuff, I got a little bit like kind of a little bit bored with her. You know what I'm saying? Because she just didn't have the sizzle that like an Exotic Joe or a Doc Ansel did. But as a whole, it's fascinating. I'm just so taken aback by how popular this has become. And another little tidbit I'll give you, like on Spotify,
Right.
on Fridays they always have New Music Friday. There's a playlist, and this past Friday they came out with a dance mix of "Here Kitty Kitty," the song that Joe Exotic made, kind of dissing, not really Joe Exotic, but something he made dissing Carol Baskin.
Oh, wow.
And I heard that, and I was just laughing in the streets. I was just laughing. But
Wow.
like I said, I'm just fascinated at this documentary and how it's just so become part of the culture. And I don't remember this story, like, but then that goes maybe to show you how much of the news I don't watch. But I don't remember this story in the news. But this is the second documentary I've seen recently, and Netflix is like really killing it for me with the documentaries. I didn't know how good these are. You know what I'm saying? So like I wouldn't be close to watching another Netflix documentary. Very good,
Oh, yeah.
very well done. Like the way it was presented, very well done.
It was. It was very well done. So, yeah. So let's continue these. This is the quarantine edition of the coronavirus COVID-19 quarantine edition of our reviews.
Yes.
So we're doing this over Skype, and yeah, be safe, everyone.
Absolutely. And we're going to be coming back next week. The movie that we've decided to watch, and if you want, you can watch along as well. It's totally cool. And when we publish our podcast, you can go ahead and comment down below when I make this into a YouTube video, when I go ahead and make this, as an episode on the blog, which is improveandhavefun.com. You can go ahead and comment, and we want to hear always what you have to say. We're going to be doing Overlord next week. That movie came out in 2018 or 2019. Fantastic movie. It's on Hulu, and horror, war movie, a little bit sci-fi as well. But
did you say it's also on Prime as well?
It may be on Prime. You know what? It may be on Prime. But Overlord, Amazon Prime, Hulu, check it out. We'll be here next week, and then we want to hear what you have to say. So we're going to sign out. We're going to continue talking, Jason, in a bit, but we're going to sign out for now, and that's the end of the Piz Kids.
Yo, nice.
Whoa.